This is Larry the Bearded Wonder with World 1-1, and you're tuned to the World 1-1 Podcast Network. Press start to engage your mind.
Hello, everybody. This is your girl Zoe, and welcome to Mind Over Media Podcast, a podcast powered by World 1-1 Network. Here's a note for all listeners. I am not a licensed psychologist, and all views from the show are from my point of view or from the point of view of my guests. Please take this into consideration while listening. Thank you. On today's show, we will be talking about the video game Gris and its take on the 5 stages of grief. This is personally one of my favorite games, and after today, I hope you'll give it a go. So let's strap in and get ready to blow our minds.
Spoilers.
As previously stated, there are spoilers ahead. While we try not to reveal everything about the media we cover, there are spoilers about the content. Keep that in mind as you enjoy today's show. Hello everyone, this is Mind Over Media Podcast, and I'm your host, Zoe. Today we are discussing the video game Gris, and to start off, what is Gris? Gris is a puzzle platform adventure game made by Spanish developer Nomada Studio and published by Devolver Digital. The game is available currently for Nintendo Switch, Mac OS, Microsoft Windows, iOS, PlayStation, and Android. And to this date, the game has sold over 1 million copies. It is a game that combines stunning visuals and music to tell a compelling story of loss and recovery. So the game follows a girl named Gris, and the game starts out with her waking up in the palm of a crumbling statue of a woman. She attempts to sing, but quickly becomes choked up. The statue begins to fall apart, and Gris drops to the ground. She finds herself in a world devoid of color, surrounded by the pieces of the broken statue. Her voice remains gone. You spend the game walking through the world, collecting mementos, which look like shiny stars, to build pathways and to gain abilities. Also, you find pieces of the statue as it puts itself back together. There is also an ominous, shape-shifting black ooze creature that seeks to knock you off your journey along the way. As you complete each section, new colors are added back to the world. It is these different sections and levels that are a metaphor for Kubler-Ross's 5-stage of grief model. So, in case you are unaware, the 5 stages of grief model says that with grief, a person will go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These are those 5 stages. It was later clarified that not everyone goes through every single stage, that the stages do not have to go in order, and you can go back and forth amongst the stages. It is not a linear journey through your grief. So, finally, how does Gris work this model into its game? Each stage in the game brings with it a new stage and an ability that relates to each of these stages. So you get a new color and a new ability with each stage. The game walks Gris through the grief of losing her mother, which was the aforementioned crumbling statue. You are moving forward to bring color back into the world and to once again find your voice. And so now we're going to break down each of these stages and show how they represent each of the stages of grief. The first stage is denial. In this stage, the world has no color and the character moves very slowly. In the game, you're constantly moving to the right of the screen. At this beginning stage, however, if you move to the left, you will sit at the base of the destroyed statue and go nowhere. It's actually an achievement in the game. And this is true in real life if you stay in denial. You can't move forward and you cannot process the grief and move on from it. So I like how this particular stage really shows denial, having nothing there and being completely devoid of color, life, and anything else. Then you move into the next stage. This is the anger stage. And this stage, you gain the color red. And the stage is full of rough winds that try to push you back and stop you from progressing. During the anger stage, people are angry about their loss and consider it unfair that this happened to them. But in this stage, you gain the ability to turn your character into a block. This allows them to brave those rough winds and get through the stage. And this is true in real life. You sort of have to harden yourself and work through your anger and those tough whirlwind emotions to continue to process your grief and move forward. Now, after you move from the red anger stage, you move into the third stage, which brings the color green. This is the bargaining stage. In this stage, you meet the forest friend. You befriend him by knocking apples out of a tree so they can eat them. Once you have given enough apples, they will lead you to the next section of the forest stage. This is a great depiction of this stage, as you're literally bargaining with someone. Apples in exchange for guidance. The bargaining stage of the grief process is where a person might seek to change the circumstances of the situation causing their grief. For example, someone who's religious might say, I'll go to church more if you can just bring this person back into my life. Or maybe if you're someone who is struggling with addiction or alcoholism, I'll stop drinking if it'll make this person come back. So you kind of say, I'll do this if it'll stop me from losing this thing that I have lost. Bargaining may help a person cope by making them feel a sense of control when they actually feel helpless. They think that, well, if I can bargain my way out of it, I can control the situation and I don't actually have to lose anything. In the next section of the forest stage, you gain the ability to double jump, and this allows you to reach new heights. You also meet some little red birds that propel you into the air that give you an added boost. You use these abilities to climb this massive tower, and this is where our ominous black creature shows up, and in this stage, in the form of a giant black bird that is trying to blow you away and knock you down and stop you from ascending this tower. But ultimately, you're able to overcome and move on to the next stage. The fourth stage that you find yourself in is blue, and this is the stage of depression. Also in this stage, you find the ability to swim amongst the deep caverns that are underneath the world that you have been in. This part of grief is when a person really feels the true weight of what they lost. Bargaining didn't work, being angry didn't work, and so they finally have to sit with the reality that they have experienced a loss. So now all you have is this profound sadness, which is shown in the blue color that you find swimming underwater in these caverns. In this stage, you also will see smaller statues of the mother figure, smaller versions of that statue, and they're crying or in feeble positions like they're hurt. And I think that really shows how the depression stage is. There's a lot of pain that comes with loss, and this stage in the game really does help to show that. As you travel further into the caverns, though, it becomes very dark and you can't see anything. This is very, very akin to how depression can feel, like you're sunken in this deep hole and there's no light, there's no way out. Also, I think this is important to show in the grief process because in order to get better, in order to process your grief, you have to dig way down into this deep hole that you don't really want to be in order to progress and move forward. So it's very fitting that you eventually reach this place where there's no light. Now, to traverse this place that has no light, you have to collect these mementos, and you activate the Turtle of Light, and this helps you traipse through the darkness. It's a giant turtle that lights your way. I like this because this very well simulates Having someone to talk to or help you through your grief process, someone has to show you the way, especially with depression. Having somebody as a support system is very, very, very important. After you traverse this dark area, you finally move into the final stage of the game. This last stage introduces the color yellow as tiny lights that guide you back to the surface. As you make your way up, the black ooze figure has reappeared again, but is transformed into an eel, and is once again trying to drag you down and stop your progress. Once you make it away from the eel, you make it back to the temple on land, except things have changed a bit. These new lights start to show you areas that were inaccessible before, which represents what this stage is. It is acceptance. You're finally realizing, yes, I had a loss, and this was part of my life, and now I have to live the rest of my life without this piece in it. So you visit all of these unknown areas, and finally you were able to gain back your voice, and you use that to help you through the rest of the levels in this stage. I also like that yellow represented light, and it's finding your way back to that light, finding your way back to yourself, to your harmony, back to your peace. So you reach the end, you climb back up to the top of the temple, and once again that black ooze creature is back. But this time, it takes the form of Gris herself. This is a great representation of having overcome yourself sometimes to get better. Because ultimately, way too often, the worst enemy of progress is yourself. This ooze pulls Gris down, and she has to climb back out of the sludge. She is climbing her way back on the statue pieces to get back to where she was, and she starts singing again, trying to keep herself there, trying to hold herself up, and the ooze comes around her and almost tries to consume her. I personally loved that image because keeping yourself on track through progress is not, oh, I made it and I'm done. You still have to fight yourself sometimes. And she got her voice back and she's there, but it still tried to pull her back down. And what happens next, the statue itself starts to sing, and Gris gets released from the ooze, and now the statue and Gris are singing in concert, and the world bursts into color and things go back to normal. What I also love is at the end of the game, the statue puts Gris back on top of the temple, and she walks up this constellation into the sky, moving on with her life, because she did lose this person, but it's almost like that person was giving her back to herself and letting her live her life. So I really liked that visual for that. So, I don't know about you from what we've been talking about today, but I believe this game is very impactful. When first playing this game, I didn't realize that it was a metaphor for the stages of grief. I saw it as a young girl trying to piece herself and her world back together after some sort of traumatic event. In many ways, it's very similar working through trauma as working through grief. The colors and the music made this game touch me emotionally in ways I didn't even know a game could. I'm not a huge gamer, but I picked this up, I couldn't put it down, and I really just saw myself in this character, the way she had to overcome these struggles to be better and gain these new abilities, and how there was always this black ooze trying to hold her down. I felt like the abilities were, tools that you get to overcome certain mental health struggles, like you might get in therapy when they give you the tools to handle your struggles. And the only critique I have for the game is that once a stage is passed, it cannot be revisited. And this misconstrues the message that the stages of grief are not linear. Whereas in the actual stages of grief in the real world, you can go back and forth, and you might go back and forth between the stages. But in this game, you cannot go backwards. So once you have finished a section, it's done, and you move forward. Other than that, I think this game is a fantastic resource for anyone who has or is currently trying to overcome trauma or a loss in their life. But I hope you enjoyed having this discussion with me, and after our discussion, consider giving Gris a go. Until next time, I'm Zoe. This was Mind Over Media Podcast, and remember, protect your peace. You can find Mind Over Media Podcast in the World 11 podcast feed at world11.podbean.com. All spelled out, all one word. World 11 Podcast Network can also be found on all major podcatchers, such as Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Good Pods. You can find the Mind Over Media Podcast on Twitter at MindMediaPDcast, and the entire World 11 Network at World1_1 Podcast.